Hi.
Where are we at, honey?
We're actually in Wiltshire, England. We came to England a couple of days ago to visit some family. Oh, there's a sign. We were looking for this.
Ah, right, there is a sign. Yes. Dun, 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 dun.
Are we going the right way then?
I would assume so from that.
We rented a canal boat on Norton Junction.
Norbury.
No, Norbury.
Norton.
Norton from. On the Norbury Junction for the day. Insert clips of Jack riding the boat. Driving the boat. You got this. And then we thought, while we're in England, we should definitely come down to Wiltshire. So today,
Yeah.
gonna go find a dolmen. What's this? This is the Devil's Den. Jack wanted to come and see West Kennet Longbarrow, and I wanted to see Devil's Den, and actually they're like 4 miles apart, so wonderful.
And such a nice day.
Hey, welcome back to our channel.
Welcome back to our channel, CoralJackz, where we visit ancient sites and explore the history and folklore that surround them. For this video, we parked up between Marlborough and Avebury at Up on the Downs car park. A quick look at OS Maps shows lots of different routes you can do to get to Devil's Den, and it could definitely be included as a stop-off on a longer route. But it was a hot day and we were trying to squeeze lots in, so we parked as close as we could.
We're not used to this heat.
No.
Well,
Don't worry, we brought lots of water for the dog and an umbrella. We stop very regularly. As you can tell, he's like quite.
He just loves it.
by
Yeah.
everything. Hey, Debbie.
He's a good boy.
Where are we going?
Hey, hey. Hiya.
But I don't think we're walking very far. I think it's just down there somewhere. So,
Yeah.
oh, I can see it.
Dun 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 dun.
Can you see it?
Oh, what, down there?
Down there.
Ah, I didn't realise it was going to be in a dip. Hold on, let me just switch to zoom. Down there. So I'm not focusing in on the pile of dung, on the pile of manure. But yeah, down there is what we're aiming for. Okay, slightly convoluted route then.
I'm gonna.
Looks like we're going way up and past, and then we'll come back round.
The shortest route from the road would take you along Clatford Bottom, but we didn't see any suitable parking for the van. Comparing our experience to some of the other ones we've read online, we can highly recommend parking at this spot, and then following this route along in a slightly convoluted curve round, which brings you back down the hill.
So you cut off the main gravel track just before they've got a big pile of sand. If you haven't got OS Maps with you, it looks like you could go through that gate, but you can't. And then cut across just before the other racecourse, and then down here.
Although at first it did seem like a bit of a detour, it gave lots of wonderful opportunities to view the monument from different angles.
He seems to understand the moving shade.
He does.
Yeah.
Is that nice?
Well, might seem mildly amusing to some, but me and Coral are actually quite excited to see this one.
I love the dolmen.
And it's the first English dolmen that we've seen in bloody years.
You'll notice we're not saying Cromlech anymore because we're not in Wales. I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah. It's fair enough. You can say that we have to call these ones dolmens. But I'm sure there's some antiquarians that still refer to them as Cromlech. Probably mostly the Welsh antiquarians. But yeah, we haven't really been out exploring in England for years, because pretty much since COVID, just before COVID, our van's been off the road. As anyone who's been watching our videos or looking at our Facebook will be well aware of, because it's all we've been talking about. But now the van is on the road, we get to do this. And we've got quite a few lined up today.
wasn't recording all of that. Should have. Jack was describing the sign. I wanted to record the stones leading up to it as well.
Yeah, the sign at the entrance here mentioned that the area has a great collection of sarsen stones, all of which have slipped from their original positions during one of the previous ice ages. So it's quite fair to mention that some of the sarsens have moved from their original positions because of ice. Always a plus to include that.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, can you see me?
I can see you. You are kind of in the shade of my hat. Such a big hat. You can take it off and see my sweaty head.
Yeah. Are you sure about that?
I don't know.
He'll get it and go, I can't do that in.
My hair. But yeah, it's really, really hot. Gorgeous day, and we're just approaching the Devil's Den. The sign at the gate mentioned that there were likely multiple burials here, and says this and the other monuments in the area make this area one of the richest in Neolithic and Bronze Age examples of funerary, religious and ceremonial monuments, which we also claim Pembrokeshire is, and also Anglesey and Ireland, Scotland. You know, there's a few rich sites in the UK, very rich sites. We're not quite getting us both in. Whoa.
But there are quite a lot of times where we're driving around and you look on the megalithic map for all the ancient sites and like, oh, is it not loaded? There's nothing around here. Look at this. Yay! Oh wow, so is he like fallen that side one then?
Oh yeah.
I will admit, it was a bit overwhelming. There were too many sites to come and visit down here, so I haven't thoroughly researched any of them yet. We'll do that later.
So this is a first look from our perspective, and then we'll do some research into the excavations and what other people have said about it when we get back.
Ooh.
The earliest illustrations of the site, from William Stukeley in 1723, show several large stones which are now not visible, and a larger mound thought to be the remains of a long barrow. He refers to it as the Kist Vein in Clapford Bottom. One of his images appears to show the monument on much higher ground than it actually is, but Stukeley is well known for his frustratingly fanciful interpretations, and the excavation report also notes this.
What's this? Is there a concrete slab?
Oh right. Has it been re-erected? Ooh, that looks suspiciously like concrete.
Wow!
So I'm assuming this is what they would call the remains of the cairn.
This concrete is...
Which, if you've watched our channel, I'm still sometimes of the opinion, as are some actual experts, that these cairns, or remains of cairns, represent actually a low platform. A platform that people could have stood on and done, you know, for the ceremonial purposes, whatever they were, and that potentially the capstones were also used and stood on. Obviously, at some sites, like West Kennet Long Barrow, there's a lot more evidence to suggest that that was actually an enclosed site. But yeah, we keep quite an open mind. Depending on what has been found at each site.
The report from the 1920s states that the ground has been long under the plough, but indications of the long barrow, of which the dolmen originally formed a part, are still to be seen. The structure as we see it now can be best described as a dolmen, with two vaguely upright stones supporting the capstone. With only tiny remnants of any mound remaining, it's hard to interpret the suggested 230-foot barrow on the roughly flat ground. But with many other long barrows in the area, it seems a fair title, and we'll have a closer look at the evidence later.
I've got some old pictures of a dude stood next to this with an old-fashioned hat. You're going to have to stand in the same pose. I'll see if I can find it.
But yeah, that's definitely a big chunk of concrete. I'm assuming that's keeping this rock up. because it does look like obviously everything must have shifted over to my right at the moment, and I'm assuming that these two stones might be still in the original position from before they've been repaired or restored, and so that they've left, this is my assumption, but we'll see if this is right, but they've probably left these two. This one was probably lying down, and the capstone had probably settled at a funny angle on top of them. If we can find an old image of that, that'd be great. But if not, I'll confirm or retract. So yeah, when you come around this side, you can see that one that's tipped in, and you can also see that these ones, what looked like just one stone from the other side, is actually two stones. One from, from now the back end of the chamber, and one from the front end of the chamber.
The capstone is estimated to weigh roughly 17 tonnes and is said to feature 2 cup marks. Cup marks are a form of prehistoric rock art, and nearby there's also the Fifield Down cup-marked rock. Despite plenty of theories, no one really knows what their original purpose was, but it's common to find them on Neolithic structures, and they often have folk tales and legends associated with them. According to local tradition, if water is poured in the hollows of the capstone, a demon will come in the night to drink it.
You know, mate. Chilling. Alright, mate.
The following is from a guide to the British and Roman antiquities of the North Wiltshire Downs. Written in 1884 by Reverend A.C. Smith, it also provides an illustration. This is a noble specimen of the kist vein. It stands erect in its original position, only denuded of the mound of earth, which, I venture to say, at one time invariably covered them. And this massive erection of ponderous stones is known as the Devil's Den, and offers an exceedingly fine specimen of the kist vein to those who have not made the acquaintance of these ancient sepulchres in other counties. It's not only in perfect condition, but of very grand dimensions. Moreover, it is well known to everybody who takes the slightest interest in Wiltshire antiquities. There are various traditions connected with it. I was told some years since, by an old man hoeing turnips near, that if anybody mounted the top of it, he might shake it in one particular part. I do not know whether this is the case or not, though it is not unusual where the capstone is upheld by only 3 supporters. But another labourer, whom I once interrogated, informed me that nobody could ever pull off the capstone, that many had tried to do so without success, and that on one occasion 12 white oxen were provided with new harness and set to pull it off. But the harness all fell to pieces immediately. As my informant evidently thought very seriously of this, and considered it the work of enchantment, I found it was not a matter for trifling to his honest but superstitious mind, and he remained perfectly unconvinced by all the arguments with which I tried to shake his credulity. Stuckley says very little of this kist vein, though he gives several plates of it, his only remark being an eminent work of this sort in Clatford Bottom, between Avebury and Marlborough. Sir Richard Hoare, in Ancient Wiltshire North, is more enthusiastic. He says, "From Marlborough I proceed along the Turnpike Road as far as the Swan public house in the parish of Clatford, and then diverge into the fields on the right, where, in retired valley amongst the hills, is a most beautiful and well-preserved kist vein, vulgarly called the Devil's Den. It has been erroneously described as a cromlech. From the elevated ground on which this stone monument is placed, it is evident that it was intended as a part annexed to the sepulchral mound, and erected, probably at the east of it, according to the usual custom of primitive times." So, on the walk there, I did mention that I thought there would be an antiquarian that referred to it as a cromlech, and it seems there have been. He's saying erroneously described as a cromlech, but you do have to remember that there are multiple definitions of the word. A lot of people, and potentially even at this time, see the word cromlech as meaning essentially a stone circle. So he would be very confused if he was thinking of that as a definition of a stone circle, whereas a lot of Welsh antiquarians were using the word cromlech simply to describe a dolmen, a raised capstone.
Jack, any thoughts on the English
Hello.
Jack, any thoughts on the English countryside so far?
Well, very hot. There's no bloody streams anywhere.
There's no streams. Look at all this land we just covered. It goes into dips. Where's the water? Is it actually drier than Wales? I'm actually getting a bit culture shocked because I think we're not in the wettest place in the world anymore.
Is it a bit more industrialised? Have they stolen all the streams? Surely though, it looks like a bit of a valley bit down there and a bit that would be marsh. And you know, in Wales we've almost every cromlech you visit has a bit of marsh near it or around it.
I put my boots on thinking there'd be a puddle I have to get through. Could have come barefoot.
So, the next reference we could find is from 1921 from the Antiquaries journal. It's written by the Reverend E. Goddard, who's the local secretary for Wiltshire. Owing partly to the continual ploughing away and levelling of the ground immediately surrounding it, this well-known dolmen showed signs of probable collapse. The Wiltshire Archaeological Society, having sought the advice of the Chief Inspector of Ancient Monuments in the matter, an expert from the Office of Works met representatives of the Society and a local contractor on the spot and gave detailed instructions for the concreting of the base of the main supporting stone which threatened to give way. This involved the shoring up of the structure whilst the necessary excavations were made, and the work now completed has proved more expensive than had been expected. To pay for this, £54, the Wiltshire Society is now raising a special fund. The excavations were carefully watched and examined on behalf of the Society by Mr. A.D. Passmore, but nothing whatever was found. The ground has been long under the plough, but indications of the long barrow, of which the dolmen originally formed a part, are still to be seen.
I said to Jack, now that we're in England, I'm now worried that I'm going to mispronounce English words. They'll people criticise me.
Well, you've got quite a distinct Welsh accent.
Yeah.
So you might be forgiven for mispronouncing English names. But because I sound like I'm from England...
Feel free to jump on Jack if you're mispronouncing it, which is wrong. Jack sounded a bit Welsh for a couple of years, actually.
When I was living in Barry.
In Barry, with the boys.
All boys.
The following year, in 1922, Wiltshire Archaeological and Natural History magazine published a couple of summaries. The work of concreting the northeast upright, which was in a dangerous condition, was carried out last September under the superintendence of Mr. A.D. Passmore at a cost of £55 raised by subscription. As regards to the Devil's Den, Mr. P. Williams asked whether the dolmen stood on the original surface or on a raised artificial mound. Mr. Passmore replied that it stood some 3 feet above the original chalk, on soil of a different colour and nature from that outside the limits of the barrow, and that he was persuaded that this was made ground. On the other hand, Mr. Cunnington suggested that perhaps this was really a portion of the original surface of the valley above the chalk, which had been scarped and retained as the nucleus of the barrow, all the similar soil, such as is often found in the bottom of a valley, having been peeled off, as on a larger scale happened at Silbury, and piled up to form the barrow. As to many of the lines of sarsens on the downs, Mr. Passmore thought that they probably dated from Romano-British times, and were formed by the stones being cleared off the cultivated fields and dragged to the side to be out of the way of the plough. Mr. Goddard remarked that precisely the same thing was being done continually to this day on arable land of the chalk.
We're headed off to now West Kennet.
With our recent experience at Folklore, we've sort of...
We've gone to the wrong gate. Okay, we're fine.
Yeah. We've gotten a little bit suspicious that if something's too good, they've probably put a gate in front of it. Ooh. I feel like my feet are swimming.
I've lived in Crocs for a few weeks now. It's the first time I put boots on and my toes are struggling.
Now, usually when it comes to the excavation reports, we'll select a few choice pieces and maybe read out a few good chunks. But this one's quite short and it's generally quite interesting, so we're going to read it in full, include the images that they've included and also a lot of our own footage. On the north side of the Kennet Valley, opposite to Clapford, a small valley, Clapford Bottom, runs to the northwest. At the mouth of this valley and south of the river, formerly stood the curious circle formed of 8 huge and roughly hewn stones, seen by Aubrey and Stuckley. The sketch made by the former being reproduced by Long. 920 yards north of the river, and in the above-mentioned valley, stands the dolmen known as the Devil's Den. Nearly due north of this, and 2,100 yards distant, stands another dolmen of the same class, on the east end of a long barrow at Dog Hill, Manton. While in almost the same line to the north, formerly stood the Temple Bottom dolmen at a distance of 1,210 yards. Thus, in a north and south line, under 2.5 miles long, 4 important megalithic monuments once existed. The Devil's Den stands just below the 500-foot contour and almost on the lowest ground in the immediate neighbourhood, being overlooked by high ground within a few yards on either side. An observer standing to the southeast and looking northwest plainly sees the remains of a large long barrow, much spread and lowered by repeated ploughing, 230 feet long and 130 feet broad. These measurements can be relied on roughly as regards to length, but not as to breadth, the whole mound having spread downhill, making an exact breadth measurement impossible except by excavation. The long axis of the barrow points to the southeast, the end in that direction being broader and higher than the opposite extremity. Roughly about 70 feet inwards from the larger end, and not in the present medial line of the barrow, stands the dolmen. Judging by the ground as it remains today, the barrow seems to have had a bayed entrance shape, like the top of the Ace of Hearts on a card, as is usual with the chambered barrows of Gloucestershire, and, as it seems likely was the case with the mutilated long barrow at Beckhampton. The largest ends of the stones face the southeast, and this aspect of the dolmen is more symmetrical than the other, proving that the entrance was at this end. It is, curiously, like Ulay, but on a larger scale. The dolmen itself, unlike most examples, which are placed on the old ground level, stands 4 feet above the old surface, and consists of 5 stones. The northeast and southwest uprights, the huge capstone, which I estimate as weighing 17 tons, and 2 other stones lying inside the chamber, which probably closed the northwest end. Beyond these, Stuckley shows 5 others lying down, 3 of which, 2 on the southwest and 1 on the northeast, stood outside the entrance, and may be the remains of an entrance passage or the stone lining of a horned entrance. Of the others, 1 was close to the southwest upright, and the remaining 1 some yards to the northwest. There were thus 10 stones in all in July 1723. Although the modern archaeologist cannot accept the fanciful imaginings of Stuckley, we are grateful for the general accuracy of his plates, which, as regards the monument under discussion, are as detailed and correct as a photograph. His plate 34 shows the capstone as level and the uprights vertical. A comparison of this plate and that of Sir Richard Colt Hoare proves that between 1723 and 1810, the base of the southwest support slipped outwards and the top of the stone consequently fell inwards, and the whole structure would have collapsed but for the stones lying inside. That the southeast took all the weight and being supported from the side slip by a small stone no bigger than a football, which became wedged between it and the northeast upright, doubtless saved the monument. The capstone, in falling about 1 foot, slipped to the southeast. This end of the stone is double the weight of the other, and consequently the double pressure at this end slewed round the southwest support considerably out of parallel, and the flat top of this stone, once in contact with the capstone, is now exposed in the chamber. The partial fall of the southwest upright threw a great strain on the opposite one, which was taking the whole pressure on the tip of the stone, the actual contact being only 4 inches long and 1 wide at the point near the southeast end. This unequal strain has developed a huge crack obliquely through more than half of the stone, which may be plainly seen from both sides. The work of destruction thus started, probably with deliberate intent. Smith mentions a tradition of it being pulled at by a team of white oxen, was further helped by someone driving an iron wedge into the crack. Atmospheric denudation had carried all the earth away from the base of the northeast stone, and in 1919 I called the attention of the committee of the Society to the immediate danger of its collapse. The committee communicated with Mr. C.R. Piers, HM Chief Inspector of the Ancient Monuments, who sent down an expert from the Office of Works to inspect the monument. He recommended that the base of the leaning stone should be securely concreted to prevent any further movement, and subsequently met the Society's representatives and the contractor, Mr. Rendell, on the spot, and gave detailed directions which were carefully carried out. The whole work was constantly watched by the writer of these notes. A beginning was made on the 12th of September 1921 by excavating a hole 12 foot northeast of the centre of the northeast support. This was carried down to a depth of 2 feet through made ground. At this depth, a large sarsen stone was reached, and as the necessary support for the props had been obtained, the excavation was stopped. Do they mean as the necessary support for the props had not been obtained? Or is that just a use of English that is a bit unfamiliar? Either way. Small holes 2 feet deep were then made at each end of the side stone, and 2 other shallow holes were dug to the east to take the timbers supporting the capstone. The whole of the timberwork and the capstone having been tightly wedged, excavation was begun at the southeast end. At the depth of a few inches, the base of the stones was exposed, and the cutting was carried down to the depth of 4 feet. When signs of the old chalk level were reached, and sufficient depth having been obtained for the concrete bed, work was stopped. This excavation was then filled with concrete from Lockridge pits, and work commenced on the northwest end. Here, a similar hole was made and filled, after which the centre part was dug out to the same depth and similarly filled, with iron bars bedded into the mass to bind the various sections together. The whole excavation was 9 feet long, 3 foot 6 inches wide and 4 feet deep, and passed through made ground, but no signs of the old turf level were observed. Every spadeful of earth thrown out was minutely examined, but nothing of any artificial nature was seen, neither pottery, bone or flint. Above the bottom of the excavation, which was considered to be undisturbed chalk, was a 4-inch layer of rubble, then 6 inches of sand, showing well-marked lines caused by having been subjected to water action, probably heavy rain. Then 4 inches of fine grit, the remaining soil above consisting of a peculiar mass of chalky lumps, which broke like marble, interspersed with sand and grit, different in character from the soil in the immediate neighbourhood, but agreeing with that of the hill side to the north. Much of the base of this hill has been cut away, and I have no doubt that the materials for the formation of this very large barrow were obtained therefrom. Throughout the whole excavation, the separate layers sloping outward and downward could be plainly seen. The concrete bed was then, by means of a frame, carried up 1.5 feet higher above the previous ground level to take the weight of the stone which overhangs on this side, and was finished off to a surface slanting outward. Under the southeast end we deposited 2 coins, dated 1920 and 1921, and at the north end a tile engraved with an account of the work, covered in wax and wrapped in lead, was buried. On the top of the concrete was carved in large figures the date 1921. The base of the northeast upright was a round section and was merely resting on the ground. A small horizontal test hole was made, passing under the base. As mentioned above, the capstone has apparently slipped slightly to the southeast, and it has become the fashion to climb up and apply pressure at one spot and rock it. This highly dangerous proceeding has now been made impossible by cementing in a sarsen wedge on the southeast end of the top edge of the northeast support. This cannot be seen unless specially looked for. A critical examination of the underside of the capstone reveals certain marks which at first appeared to be due to pounding with a maul. It is now, however, clear that they are due to weathering. To ascertain the character of the surrounding topsoils, trial holes were dug to the east and southwest of the dolmen, well clear of the barrow. The sections there seen were different from that of the mound. I am greatly indebted to Captain Edwards and Mr. Taylor of Manton for much kindness and advice, also to Mr. M. Jones for the scale plan of the monument. The block illustrating the Devil's Den before the underpinning is kindly lent by the editor of the Observer.